From my attic window, I watched the day my sons became strangers. By the time I rose from that old wooden chair, my knees aching and my hand numb from gripping the window frame, I knew nothing in this house would ever feel quite the same again. It did not happen with shouting, or sirens, or any of the loud things we usually blame for breaking a family. No. It arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, so ordinary you would have walked right past it. If you stay with me, I will take you back to that day, to the dust and the light of this attic, to the yard below, to the small looks and careless words that slipped through the cracks. And you will see, as I did, how a mother can suddenly realize she has been loving not two real men, but two stories she once told herself about her boys. Have you ever woken up and felt that someone you love is standing just a little farther away, even if they are right there in front of you? That is where this begins. The attic has always been my place. If you climbed the narrow staircase, careful of that third step that squeaks, you would find it just as I did that morning, a low ceiling with beams darkened by time, the smell of dry wood and old paper, trunks lined along the wall like quiet old soldiers. The window sits low in the eave, a bit off-center, with wavy glass that makes the world outside look softer than it really is. I have sat in front of that window for more years than I can remember, mending clothes, sorting photographs, hiding tears I did not want my boys, or later, my grandchildren, to see. That Tuesday, the house was still. Too still. The clock in the hallway chimed 8 in its rusty, half-hearted way. The kettle had whistled earlier, my hands remember the weight of the mug, but I could not tell you what I drank. Habit, more than thirst, guides you in these later years. It was the kind of morning that pretends it has no secrets. The sky was one unbroken gray sheet. The maple tree out back shook its leaves like a woman dusting a tablecloth, letting little bits of yellow fall onto the lawn. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once and then thought better of it. I came up to the attic because my hands needed something to do. They always do when my mind is restless. I told myself I would finally go through the box of Christmas ornaments missing hooks, or the stack of letters tied with the blue ribbon. But really, I came for the window. From here, you can see almost everything. The back porch, with its peeling white rail. The yard, a little patchy now, tired from too many summers of boys' feet and makeshift baseball games. The narrow driveway that runs along the side of the house to the street, where my sons first learned the geometry of turning a steering wheel. It is a strange thing, to look down on the world where your life happened. That morning, I saw Daniel first. I can still remember the way his car pulled up, too carefully, as if he did not quite trust the brakes. He drives like his father did toward the end, cautious, calculating, leaving more distance than needed. He stepped out with that familiar stiffness in his shoulders, the one he pretends is from the office chair but I know is from carrying people. The responsible one. The one who remembers trash day and sends emails and prints out forms. He closed the door gently, like it might break. Daniel has always been gentle with objects. Not always with people. And then, a few minutes later, I saw Michael. I heard him first, the music leaking faintly from his phone, the careless slam of his old truck door. He moves through the world as if bumping into it is proof he is still here. His jacket was half-zipped. He carried nothing, as though he expected the day to give him what he needed. From up here, the two of them looked almost like their younger selves again, two figures moving across the yard in uneven lines, drawn toward the same house for different reasons. They did not see me. People rarely look up. They met near the back steps. It should have been a simple thing, two brothers greeting each other outside their mother's home. A small, ordinary scene, a pat on the shoulder, a shared smile, some joke about the weather or the drive. And in a way, that is what happened. But there was something else, too. The first thing that felt wrong was the pause. They stopped a few feet apart and, instead of falling into each other's arms the way boys used to when they wrestled and shouted and grabbed, they just measured each other. Two grown men balancing on an invisible scale. Daniel spoke first. I could not hear his words through the glass, but I saw the shape of them, clipped and careful. Michael answered with a half-smile that did not reach his eyes. I leaned closer to the window, my breath fogging the glass, my hand pressing into the old wood of the frame. I told myself they were just tired, just busy, just grown. But there was a stiffness in the air between them that I had never seen before, not like this. Have you ever watched two people you love and felt, without a single clear reason, that something was off? That is what I felt. A thread pulled slightly out of place. A picture almost, but not quite, straight on the wall. They moved toward the porch steps, Daniel leading, Michael trailing a half step behind. I noticed how Daniel kept glancing at the house, not with affection, but with calculation, his eyes running along the gutters, the peeling paint, the sinking step. It was the way you look at something you mean to fix, or to sell. Michael, on the other hand, was not looking at the house at all. His gaze drifted instead toward the street, as if he were already halfway gone. That was the second thing that felt wrong. All these years, when my boys came home, the house was the center of their attention. They would burst through the door, calling out, "Mom," before they even dropped their keys. They would smell what was on the stove, ask who else was coming over, fall onto the couch like divers into water. But this time, they hovered outside, on the edge of the life that had raised them. I sat back in my chair, my heart beginning to itch with a feeling I could not yet name. Perhaps, I thought, it is just me. Perhaps I am simply getting old and reading too much into the way the light falls across the yard. But somewhere inside me, a quiet voice, one that has kept watch through broken bones and teenage silences and late-night phone calls, whispered, "Pay attention." And so I did. The mind has a way of pulling yesterday into today, especially when you watch from a distance. As I sat there, my boys moving like small figures in a play below me, memories rose up as easily as dust when you open an old trunk. For a moment, they were not men standing awkwardly near my back steps. They were barefoot little boys in the same patch of yard, Daniel's hand wrapped around Michael's wrist as he tugged him out of the path of a bicycle. Daniel was the careful one even then. When he was 5 and Michael was 3, Daniel would line up their toy cars by color and size, creating tidy rows, little worlds of order. If Michael sent one flying off the table with a wild whoop, Daniel would frown, retrieve it, and place it exactly where it belonged. I remember one summer afternoon when Michael climbed higher than he should have into the maple tree. I was at the kitchen sink, my hands in soapy water, my heart in my throat. Before I could even step outside, Daniel was already at the base of the tree, talking to his brother in that small, serious voice he used when he wanted to sound like his father. "Come down, Mike," he said. "You're scaring Mom." Michael, dangling from a branch, just laughed. "You come get me." So Daniel did. He shimmied up the trunk, clinging with more determination than skill, reached out that small, steady hand, and guided his brother to a lower branch. Later, when they stood in front of me, scraped and dirty, it was Daniel who took the blame. "That's my fault," he said. "I should have watched him better." That was the day I started calling him the responsible one. Labels are dangerous little things. They feel so harmless when you first say them. Michael became the dreamer in my mind. He was always a little sideways to the world, seeing possibilities where the rest of us saw only chores. Give him a stick and he would hand you back a sword, a fishing pole, a magic wand. He kept fireflies in jars and tried to build a rocket out of cardboard boxes and empty cans. There was that night when he came into my room at 2 in the morning, his hair wild with sleep, his face streaked with tears. He had had a nightmare, he said, about me disappearing. "Where did I go?" I asked, lifting the blanket for him to crawl under. "You were just gone." His little body trembled against mine until the sun pushed at the curtains. That morning, he followed me from room to room, as if I might disappear if he looked away. I told myself, Michael is sensitive, creative, a dreamer. I told myself, Daniel is strong, steady, a protector. We all do this, you know. We build short stories about the people we love. It helps us understand them. It helps us sleep at night. But a short story cannot hold a whole life. As the years rolled on, those stories hardened. When Daniel stayed in on Friday nights to study while other boys went to parties, I nodded and thought, of course. The responsible one. When he stepped in to calm an argument between his father and Michael, I saw a peacemaker, a bridge. When Michael came home late, smelling of smoke and someone else's perfume, I sighed and thought, that's our dreamer, chasing the moon again. There was one evening, not long before their father died, that returns to me now like a quiet knock at the back door. We were in the kitchen, the three of us. Their father was in the living room, the television too loud, the ghosts of his unfinished dreams louder still. Daniel was standing at the counter, his hands on a stack of bills. Michael leaned against the fridge, arms crossed, a fresh bruise on his cheek from some bar fight he said was no big deal. It's not enough, Daniel said, his jaw tight. The mortgage, the hospital, the credit card, it's not enough. We'll figure it out, I told him, though I had no idea how. Michael rolled his eyes. You worry too much, Dan. Something will come through. It always does. Something? Daniel snapped. That's your plan? Something? The word cut more deeply than you would think. They argued there in my kitchen, my two stories clashing, responsibility sneering at dreaming, dreaming mocking responsibility. Finally, Daniel pushed the stack of bills away. You know what, Mike? One day, you're going to have to grow up. Mom and Dad won't always be here to patch everything together for you. Michael's smile vanished. His face closed like a door. Maybe I didn't ask to be patched together by you, he said. Maybe I'm tired of being the one who's always broken in your eyes. Then he walked out, the back door slamming hard enough to rattle the glass. At the time, I told myself, brothers fight. They will cool off. I made tea for Daniel, sent a silent prayer after Michael, and folded that night away with all the other evenings that felt too heavy to hold. I see it differently now. Memory is a tricky mirror. It shows you what you were ready to see and hides the rest until you are strong enough, or desperate enough, to look again. As I watched them from the attic window that Tuesday morning, those old scenes came back not as background, but as clues. And then another memory surfaced. A smaller one, but sharper. It was a few months before this day at the window. I had called Daniel in the afternoon because the hallway light had flickered twice, and my chest had flickered too, with a fear I could not quite name. Can you come by and look at it? I asked. He did, of course. He came with his toolbox and his calm voice and his way of sighing so softly you almost missed it. While he worked, I tried to make small talk. Have you talked to your brother? I asked. He hasn't called in a while. Daniel hesitated, his hand frozen on the light switch. It was just a second, a breath, but I felt it. He's busy, he said finally. You know how he is. The way he said it, I realized later, wasn't annoyed. It was tired. Later that week, I tried calling Michael myself. The call went to voicemail. When he called back 2 days later, his voice was bright, almost too bright. Hey, Mom. Sorry, I've been swamped. New project, long hours, you know how it is. I asked, are you eating enough? Sleeping? There was a pause, and in that silence, I felt a small distance I did not know how to cross. I'm fine, he said. Don't worry. I did not press. I did not ask what new project meant, where long hours were spent. I let the story of the dreamer doing something creative fill in the blanks. But as that Tuesday unfolded from my attic window, the blanks began to look less like harmless white space and more like holes. And I was about to see just how large they had become. From the attic, their voices reached me in pieces. Fragments, like bits of conversation heard while passing a stranger on a sidewalk. Daniel had unlocked the back door, but instead of going inside, he paused on the porch, turning back toward Michael. I watched as Daniel gestured toward the house, first the roofline, then the windows, then the sagging step that had given me a scare last winter. His mouth moved, and even though I could not catch each word, I knew the shape of the conversation. It was the shape of decisions. Michael shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his hands restlessly tapping the railing. He looked, for a moment, like a boy standing outside the principal's office, waiting to hear a verdict. I opened the attic window a few inches. The old wood complained with a soft groan, but the house has so many sounds that one more hardly mattered. Cool air slipped in, carrying the faded scent of wet leaves and, at last, their voices. "Can't keep putting this off," Daniel was saying. "We have to talk about it." "Talk about what?" Michael's voice, still trying for lightness, but with an edge I had not heard before. "You already made up your mind." "I haven't made up anything. I'm trying to be practical." Practical. It is a harmless word until it is pointed at someone's life. I held my breath, leaning so close that my forehead rested against the glass, the cold seeping into my skin. "This place is falling apart," Daniel continued. "The roof needs work, the wiring is ancient, the stairs are a hazard. She almost fell last winter, remember?" I did not remember, almost, falling. I remembered the slight slip, the way my hand caught the rail, the sharp beat of my heart. I had laughed it off to Daniel that day. "Clumsy me," I said. He had not laughed. "I remember," Michael said now. "I was there. I also remember you insisting on getting all the estimates and then, not doing anything. Because she didn't want." "She wanted to stay," Michael cut in. "She wants this house. It's her home." His words wrapped around me like a shawl, but they did not warm me. Not this time. There was a silence, heavy and full. Then Daniel spoke again, more quietly. "Wanting and being able to safely live here are two different things, Mike. We have to think about the future. We're not kids anymore. We can't pretend this house, and," he paused, and in that pause, I felt something sharp, "and she are going to stay the same forever. Have you ever heard someone talk about you as though you're a problem to be solved?" The attic felt smaller. Michael laughed, but the sound was brittle. "You mean you have to think about the future? You love this stuff, don't you? Spreadsheets and plans and tough decisions. Makes you feel like the hero." "I'm tired of being the hero," Daniel snapped. The words hit me like a sudden gust. "I'm tired of being the only one who shows up when things get hard. When Dad was sick, who took time off work? Who handled the paperwork, the calls, the hospice visits? Me. You breezed in on weekends with your jokes and your guitar, and then you left before things got really messy." "That's not fair," Michael said. His voice dropped, almost a growl. "You don't know what was going on with me then." "Because you never told me," Daniel shot back. "You never tell anyone anything real. You just perform. Smile for Mom, crack a joke for the nurses, disappear when the bills come due." I had never heard them talk like this. Not with these words. Not with this rawness. A part of me wanted to close the window, to shut out the sound, to let the stories I had lived with continue unchallenged. But my hand would not move. "Look," Daniel continued, softer now, rubbing his forehead. "This isn't about the past. It's about now. We can't ignore that she's getting older. She forgets things. She almost left the stove on last month." "I caught it," Michael said quickly. "That's not the point." "Then what is the point, Dan? Say it." Daniel took a breath. From the attic, I could see the way his chest rose and fell, the way his fingers tightened around the porch railing. "The point is," he said slowly, "we have to seriously consider selling the house and moving her into assisted living before something terrible happens." The world, for a moment, went very quiet. The kind of quiet you get right before a dish slips from your hand and shatters. Assisted living. The words floated up to the attic like strange birds, circling overhead, looking for a place to land. My first feeling was not anger. It was surprise, almost disbelief. As if they had been discussing some other old woman in some other old house, and the names had gotten tangled. My second feeling was fear. Not of the place itself. I have seen those buildings, with their beige carpets and floral curtains, but of what it meant. Of what my sons saw when they looked at me. How long had they been thinking this? How many conversations about my life had happened without me, just outside my line of sight, like this one on the porch below? Michael paced, running a hand through his hair. We can't just uproot her. This house is all she has. That's not true, Daniel said. She has us. Does she? Michael flung the question at him like a stone. She has you, sure. The golden child, the one who knows best. I'm just the screw-up who shows up with flowers and leaves before you start counting the petals. You think that's how I see you? Daniel asked, his voice sharp with something that sounded like hurt. How else would you see me? Michael replied. You're the responsible one. I'm the disappointment. It's been that way since we were kids. I felt those words like a hand closing around my heart. I had never called him that. Not out loud. Not to his face. But had I, in my mind? In my sighs? In the way I told stories about my sons to neighbors and friends? This isn't about labels, Daniel said. This is about reality. We can't afford to keep this place up and pay for a full-time caregiver if she needs one. I've run the numbers. I can't cover it alone. Alone. Michael stopped pacing. What do you mean, alone? Daniel's silence was another crack in my picture of them. You think I don't know you've been bailing her out? Michael asked quietly. That I didn't see your name on those checks? The property tax, the credit card? You never told me, but I'm not blind. It doesn't matter, Daniel said quickly. I did what needed to be done. Without talking to me. You were barely talking to any of us. There it was again, that wordless space, full of things unsaid. I realized then that my boys had been living entire chapters of their lives out of my sight, out of the stories I had written for them. Money I did not know about. Fights I had not heard. Decisions made in whispers, in cars, in late-night calls cut short before I answered. I had thought that because I carried them in my body once, would always be at the center of their lives. That motherhood granted me a permanent front-row seat. From the attic window, I saw how wrong I was. Michael's shoulders slumped. When he spoke again, his voice was different, emptier. You think it'll be better for her? Some place with strangers in white shoes and hallway bingo? It'll be safer, Daniel said. Clean. Monitored. If she falls, someone will be there. If she wanders. I told you, she's fine, Michael interrupted. She forgets a word here and there, misplaces her glasses. You act like she's already gone. I'm trying to make sure she doesn't get gone while no one's there to help, Daniel shot back. Have you ever watched people argue about what is best for you, as if you were a piece of furniture they needed to move before the floor gave out? A strange thing happened then. As I listened, my sons' voices shifted in my ears. They were not my boys anymore, not the versions I had held on to. They were two grown men with tired eyes and old resentments, navigating a problem that had my face on it. They were people. Flawed, frightened, trying, failing. And in that moment, I did not fully recognize them. They were strangers who happened to know where the spare key was hidden. I'm not signing anything, Michael said finally. You want to sell the house, you'll have to do it without me. Daniel rubbed his temples. Why does it always have to be like this with you? Everything a fight. Everything dramatic. Because you always come in with your binder and your plans like you're the only adult in the room. Michael exploded. You never ask what I can do, what I'm willing to do. You just decide and then inform me. Fine, Daniel said quietly. What are you willing to do, Mike? Really? Not in theory, not as a promise you'll forget in a week. Right now. The pause that followed was longer than all the others. I watched my younger son's face, the way his jaw clenched, the way his eyes darted toward the street again, then back to the house. I can visit more, he said. I can. I don't know. Help out around here. Drive her to appointments. Your job barely lets you sleep, Daniel replied. Last month, you canceled twice. You called me from some parking lot, said you had to work late. And you were drunk. I flinched. I had not known that part. Michael's shoulders sagged. I was trying, okay? His voice broke a little. You think I like feeling like this? Like I'm always behind, always failing? Then step up, Daniel said, not unkindly. Really step up. Because right now, it's me and this house and a clock that's ticking faster than you seem to realize. I felt suddenly exposed, as if the walls of the house had turned to glass. My memory of myself, competent, in control, the mother who managed everything, felt thin, like old fabric held up to the light. Had I been missing the signs? The bills Daniel quietly paid? The cancelled visits from Michael? The way my own hand sometimes trembled when I tried to thread a needle? Maybe she should decide, Michael said suddenly. Daniel looked up sharply. What? Maybe we should actually talk to her, Michael insisted. Ask her what she wants. Not plan her life over her head like. He stopped, glancing toward the attic window for the first time, as if some instinct told him he was being watched. I froze. Like she's not even here, he finished more quietly. Do you know what it feels like to realize your children have been carrying the weight of you, even as you thought you were still carrying them? Standing at that window, I felt something inside me crack, not a sharp, breaking crack, but a slow, spreading one, like ice thawing on a river. For the first time, I saw my sons not as extensions of my own story, but as separate novels with whole chapters one had never read. Some of those chapters frightened me. Some made me ache with guilt. Others, I knew, would make me proud if I ever had the courage to open them. But in that moment, they were strangers to me. Strangers who somehow had my husband's smile, my father's stubborn chin, my mother's way of rubbing the bridge of her nose when she was tired. I pressed my palm flat against the glass and whispered, to no one and everyone, who are you? Down below, Daniel sighed. We'll talk to her, he said finally. After we at least get the facts. I have an appointment this afternoon to see the place near the park. The one with the garden she liked on the brochure. You already made an appointment? Michael asked. I told you, Daniel replied, his voice weary. I'm trying to be practical. Unbelievable, Michael muttered, pushing past him toward the door. Come on. Let's just go inside. They stepped over the threshold together, leaving the yard empty. I stayed there, at the attic window, watching the door close on the world I thought I knew. I did not follow them down right away. My knees would have made an excuse, but the truth is, my heart was not ready. Instead, I remained in my old wooden chair, the attic around me suddenly crowded with ghosts. The trunks behind me seemed to hum with old lives. The boxes of school projects, the faded costumes from Halloween, the photo albums stacked with smiling faces all looked different now, as if I had been looking at them from the wrong angle for years. I reached for the nearest album, its spine worn soft by my fingers. On the cover, in gold letters barely clinging to the leather, it said, Our Boys. I opened it. There they were, Daniel at 6, missing his front teeth, holding a fishing pole twice his size, Michael at 4, covered in mud, grinning at the camera as if trouble were a friend standing just off frame. Side by side on the couch with their father, asleep in a tangle of limbs and popcorn crumbs. First day of school, first snowfall, first car, first broken heart, though you could not see that part in the pictures, only in the two wide smiles. As I turned the pages, the labels I had given them, the responsible one, the dreamer, rose up from the paper like old wallpaper peeling off a damp wall. I remembered the science fair where Daniel's project won second place and Michael's volcano failed to erupt. Daniel stood quietly, holding his ribbon, while Michael kicked at the gym floor and fought tears. On the drive home, I praised Daniel's neat charts, his careful measurements. I told him I was proud. I told him he would go far if he kept working hard. To Michael, I said, It's okay, honey. Not everything has to be perfect. You're creative. That's what matters. How many times had I drawn those same lines between them, thinking I was encouraging them, not boxing them in? I thought of the night Daniel came home late from college, his face pale, his eyes rimmed red. I had been waiting up, of course. A mother's insomnia is a thing no doctor can cure. What's wrong? I asked, my heart already jumping toward the worst. He shook his head. Nothing. Just tired. I pushed a little. You can tell me. He sat down at the table, his hands flat on the wood. I don't know if I want to be an engineer anymore. I blinked, surprised. But you've worked so hard. You're so good at it. I'm good at it, he agreed. I don't know if I love it. I remember what I said next like a stone I've carried in my pocket for years without realizing it was there. You can't always do what you love, sweetheart. You do what you're good at. What's sensible? Dreams are for later. He nodded, slowly, and something shuddered in his eyes. Dreams are for later. Had I handed him my own fear as if it were wisdom? Then there was Michael, years later, sitting on the edge of his bed, a packed suitcase at his feet. He was 23, his band just starting to get local gigs, his smile bright and a little too hopeful. Mom, he said, we got an offer to go on tour. Just a few months. Small venues, but it could lead to something big. I sat down beside him. What about your job at the store? What about health insurance? What about everything? I'll figure it out, he said, eyes shining. Luke's cousin knows someone at a label. This could be my shot. All I could see were the risks. The empty bank accounts, the late-night bars, the strangers. I pictured him broken down in some faraway town, or worse, not coming back at all. Maybe, I said carefully, you should get something solid first. A degree. A career. Then you can chase all the music you want. Dreams are. I stopped myself, but the sentence finished itself in my head, dreams are for later. He looked at me for a long moment, the joy in his face dimming. Yeah, he said finally. You're probably right. The tour never happened. Sitting in the attic, I realized how my stories for them, my fears dressed up as love, had woven themselves into the fabric of who they became. I had not created their lives, no. They made their own choices, fought their own battles. But I had been there, leaning on the scale, even when I thought I was just cheering from the sidelines. Downstairs, I could hear the low murmur of their voices. Cabinets opening, chairs scraping. The ordinary sounds of a home on a Tuesday morning. Only now, each sound felt like a line in a language I did not fully understand. When I finally stood and made my way down the attic stairs, my hand on the rail, the house felt different beneath my feet. The photographs on the walls watched me pass. The floorboards seemed to remember the weight of boys' feet, lighter and faster than mine. I paused at the doorway to the kitchen. Daniel was at the table, his laptop open, a spreadsheet glowing on the screen. Papers were spread out in neat stacks, corners aligned. His coffee sat untouched, growing cold. Michael stood at the stove, stirring something in a pot. From the smell, I guessed it was oatmeal, though he had added cinnamon and chopped apples, making it fancier than I ever did. They both looked up when I entered, and in that moment, for the briefest beat, they were my boys again, caught doing something, waiting to see if it meant trouble. Morning, Mom, Daniel said, closing the laptop halfway, as if he could hide his plans by dimming the light. Hey, Ma, Michael added, his smile quick and practiced. Got your breakfast going? I leaned against the doorframe, my fingers searching for the groove worn there over years of family traffic. How long have you been here? I asked. They exchanged a glance. Just a flicker. Just long enough for me to see the unspoken conversation moving between them like an underground river. Not long, Daniel said. Long enough to almost burn the oatmeal, Michael joked, though nothing was burned. Have you ever known that people have been talking about you, and then watched them carefully erase the evidence? I walked to the table and sat down. My chair gave its familiar little groan, the same sound it had made under my husband, under my sons, under countless guests. Michael set a bowl in front of me, the oatmeal steaming, the apples arranged on top like a flower. "Thank you," I said, meaning it more deeply than he knew. As I lifted the spoon, I studied their faces. The lines by Daniel's eyes, carved by years of squinting at screens and shouldering responsibility. The faint scar near Michael's eyebrow from a bottle thrown in a bar when he was 20 and trying to impress the wrong crowd. How much of their tiredness had I mistaken for maturity? How much of their distance had I chalked up to adulthood, when really it was something more complicated, more painful? We talked, then, about little things. The weather. Traffic. A new neighbor down the street who put out 2 different flags on his porch and confused everyone. The big things hovered above us, unspoken, like a low ceiling. At one point, Daniel mentioned, too casually, "I was thinking we could drive out later, check out that garden near the park you liked." My spoon paused halfway to my mouth. How do you answer a sentence when you know what is hiding behind it? "Maybe," I said. "We'll see how I feel." Michael shot Daniel a look that said, "I told you not to start." Daniel ignored it, his jaw tightening. The rest of the morning moved in small, careful steps. Daniel made a few calls in the other room, his voice low. I heard words like availability, assessment, payment options. Michael busied himself with chores, fixing a loose cabinet hinge, replacing a flickering bulb. He whistled as he worked, but the tune kept breaking off in the middle. In between, I watched them. Not the way I always had, from the center of their lives, but from a slight distance, as if they were walking past me on a street and I was trying to decide what kind of men they were. I noticed how Daniel's hand trembled slightly when he thought no one was looking. How Michael's jokes were almost always about himself, making himself the fool before anyone else could. I replayed old conversations in my head, hearing them differently now. The times Daniel had said, "Don't worry about it, Mom. I've got it covered," and I had taken comfort instead of asking, "At what cost?" The times Michael had said, "I'm fine, really," and I had accepted the words, grateful to avoid the weight of what might be hiding underneath. It is a hard thing, realizing that some of your kindness was, in truth, avoidance. As the day wore on, a quiet grief settled over me. Not just for the house I might be leaving, or the independence slipping slowly from my fingers, but for the version of my sons I had been holding on to, boys frozen in amber, neat and simple stories. I understood, suddenly, that I was mourning someone who had never fully existed. 2 someones, in fact. My responsible one. My dreamer. They were real, yes, but only as parts of a larger, messier whole. I had loved those parts fiercely and unconditionally. I realized I knew less about the rest of them than I would about a stranger I sat next to on a bus for an hour. That afternoon, when Daniel said it was time to go see the garden, I surprised us all. "No," I said quietly. Both heads turned toward me. "No?" Daniel repeated, as if the word were new. I met his eyes. "No. Not yet. Not until we have a real conversation. The 3 of us. Without whispering in hallways or on porches." Michael's eyebrows shot up. Daniel opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. "Okay," he said finally. "We can talk." We sat at the table again, the same table that had held birthday cakes and overdue bills and late-night homework. The afternoon light slanted in, catching motes of dust that danced between us like nervous thoughts. "I heard you," I began. "This morning. From the attic." Silence. Daniel's face drained of color. Michael's hand went automatically to the back of his neck, that old nervous habit. "How much did you hear?" Daniel asked quietly. "Enough," I said. "Enough to know you are both more afraid than you let on. Enough to know you have been carrying things alone. Enough to realize that I do not know you as well as I thought." "Mom, we were just worried about you," Michael started. "I know," I said. "I am not angry about that. I am grateful, even. But I am also surprised." The word felt too small for what I meant, but it was the best I could do. Surprised? Daniel echoed. Surprised, I repeated, to find out my life has become something to be managed behind my back. Surprised to learn that you, Daniel, have been paying bills in secret. Surprised that you, Michael, have been canceling visits because you were too worn out, or too drunk, to come. Surprised that when you look at me, you see someone fragile enough to move like a piece on a board. Mom, Daniel began. I held up a hand. Let me finish. They fell silent. I am also surprised, I said slowly, to realize that I have been doing the same thing to you for years. Managing my idea of you instead of seeing who you really are. Filling in your silences with the stories that made me feel safest. They exchanged a quick look, confusion flickering between them. I thought, I went on, that Daniel was always strong and Michael was always lost. That one of you needed me to worry about his dreams, and the other needed me to rely on his sense. I see now that I have been clinging to those pictures because they made me feel like I understood my own family. A tear slid down my cheek before I could catch it. I don't, I admitted. Not the way I thought. You are not boys anymore. You are not only the stories I wrote when you were small. Mom, Michael whispered, his voice suddenly hoarse. We didn't mean to. I know, I said gently. That is what makes it so human. We sat there, three people at a kitchen table, suddenly aware of how little we knew. Have you ever looked at someone you love and felt, all at once, the distance between who they are now and who you still believe them to be? It is a dizzying thing. It makes you want to reach out and hold on and step back all at the same time. The conversation that followed was not neat. Life rarely is. We talked in circles and half-finished sentences, stopping sometimes just to breathe. There were long pauses when no one spoke, and during those, the refrigerator hum suddenly seemed very loud. I asked questions I should have asked years before. Daniel, I said, when did you start paying the property tax? He hesitated. After Dad died, he said at last. The first year, you forgot. Got a late notice. I told you it was a mistake, that the mail was slow. But I saw how much it stressed you, so the next year I just took care of it before it became a problem. Why didn't you tell me? He shrugged, looking down at his hands. I didn't want you to feel helpless. I thought it would worry you. Or maybe, I said softly, it reassured you to be the one in charge. He looked up, surprised, and then, after a beat, he nodded. Maybe, he admitted. I turned to Michael. And you, I said. How long have you been more tired than you let on? He laughed once, without humor. Since. I don't know. A long time. The band never really took off, so I took one job, then another. Night shifts, deliveries, whatever paid quick. It added up. So did the drinking. My chest tightened. Why didn't you tell me? He picked at a chip in the tabletop. Because you always looked at me like I was capable of something bigger. Like I still had some great dream out there waiting. I didn't want you to see that I was just tired and behind on rent. You thought I would be disappointed, I said. He didn't answer, but his silence spoke clearly. I was already disappointed, I confessed, the words trembling. Not in you. In myself. In the way my life narrowed after your father got sick. In the dreams I folded up and put in drawers. I pushed that disappointment away by focusing on yours. It felt easier to worry about your paths than to look at my own. We sat with that truth for a while. It was not a gentle thing, but it was honest. Slowly, we began to talk not as mother and sons, with all the weight those roles carry, but as three adults trying to figure out how to love each other without pretending. We talked about the house, about the cracking paint and the unreliable stairs, about how the furnace makes that strange clanging noise in January. We talked about my body, about the mornings when my joints ache so much I pretend I slept in, about the nights when I lie awake, not from insomnia this time, but from the realization that my world has shrunk to these walls. We talked about money, uncomfortable, necessary words, laid out on the table like bills used to be. I don't want to be a burden, I told them. You're not, Daniel said quickly. You feel like one, Michael added, almost at the same time, wincing as the words left his mouth. I mean, sometimes. To me. But not because of you, because of everything I'm not doing right. Honesty has a way of stumbling at first, then finding its feet. By the time the sunlight had shifted toward late afternoon, we had not solved everything. The house was still old. I was still aging. Their jobs were still demanding and imperfect. But something had changed. The strangers I had seen from the attic window that morning were slowly, tentatively, becoming people I could get to know. Not as the boys they were, but as the men they had become. I don't want to be moved like furniture, I said at one point, my voice quieter now. I don't want decisions made about my life without me. But I also don't want you two to drown under the weight of pretending I'm not changing. So what do you want? Daniel asked. I thought of the assisted living brochure with its smiling faces and carefully staged gardens. I thought of my attic window, of the view I had loved for so long. I thought of the way my hands sometimes trembled when I carried laundry up the stairs. I want, I said slowly, choosing each word, us to decide together. Honestly. I want you to bring me the numbers, the options, the fears. I want to walk through those gardens myself and not have you filter them for me. I want you to see me as I am, not as the mother who could do everything once. And us? Michael asked quietly. What about how you see us? I looked at them, really looked this time. I want, I said, to let go of those tidy little labels I wrapped around you like blankets. You are not the responsible one and the dreamer. You are Daniel, who sometimes wants to run away from responsibility, and Michael, who has been more responsible for other people's happiness than I ever realized. I want to meet you again, as if for the first time. Love is not ownership, but staying to witness who they become. We sat in the soft, uncertain light of that new understanding. Later, when they had gone, Daniel back to his spreadsheets and meetings, Michael back to his odd jobs and late evenings, I climbed the stairs to the attic again. The house creaked under my feet, familiar and foreign at once. The window waited, its glass a little smudged from my breath earlier. I sat down in my chair and looked out. The yard was empty now, the maple tree whispering secrets to no one. The porch, where my sons had stood and argued about my future, looked smaller from this angle, like part of a dollhouse. I realized, then, that this window had always given me a comforting illusion, that from up here, I could see everything. That I had the full picture. I see now that I was only ever looking at one side of the glass. Our children grow up and move out, yes, but they also grow secret rooms inside themselves, places we are not invited into, not because they do not love us, but because they, too, are trying to figure out who they are without our stories holding them in place. That day, from the attic window, my sons became strangers to me. Not because they had changed overnight, but because I finally saw how much I had missed while I was busy polishing the versions of them I carried in my heart. It hurt. It still hurts sometimes. But there is something else now, too. Curiosity. I find myself asking different questions when they call. Not just, are you eating, and how is work, but, what scares you these days, and what surprised you this week? They don't always answer fully. Habits take time to unlearn. But sometimes, there is a pause, and then a little more truth than before. My love for them has not changed. If anything, it has deepened, stretched to make room for the parts of them I do not understand and may never fully see. Our children outgrow our stories long before they outgrow our homes. From this attic window now, I no longer watch as a general surveying his troops. I watch as a witness, an old woman in a worn chair, learning to see not just what is comforting, but what is real. Perhaps that is what family really is, not a fixed picture, but a long series of chances to meet each other again, and again, and again, if we are brave enough to look. If you have listened this far, maybe some part of this feels familiar. Maybe you, too, have looked at someone you love, a child, a partner, a parent, and felt that sudden, unsettling distance between the story in your mind and the person in front of you? If so, sit with that feeling. Do not run from it. There is grief there, yes, but there is also an invitation. An invitation to ask, who are you, really, today? And, perhaps more frightening, who am I, if I stop telling myself the same old stories? The attic window is still my place. I will likely sit here until they one day carry the boxes down instead of up. But now, when I rest my hand on the frame and look out at the street, the yard, the door my sons still walk through, I remember. This window does not show me strangers. It shows me people I am still getting to know. If this story brought someone from your own life into your mind, someone you thought you knew by heart, hold them gently there for a moment. Maybe, after this, you will talk to them a little differently. Or simply listen a little more closely. Before you go, if you would like to hear more stories like this, slow, soft, a little worn around the edges, the way memories are, please tap like so others can find their way to this attic window too, and share this with someone who might need it. It helps more than you know, especially here at Dust of Old Days. And if you want to sit with more grandmother-style tales about families, the past, and the quiet moments that change everything, you're welcome to subscribe to Dust of Old Days. There is always another story waiting in the dust and light up here. For now, I will leave you with this. My sons did not really become strangers that day. I simply saw that I had been a stranger to parts of them. And from this window, I am still watching, still learning, still loving. Not the boys I remember, but the men they have become, and are still becoming. The view, from up here, is not what it used to be. In some ways, it is harder. In other ways, it is finally true.